Welcome to the second session of day 7. 7 is my lucky number, and you are in for a treat. You're very lucky because you get to hear from the wonderful Kate Christiansen. Kate is Australia's leading expert in curly conversations. These twisting and turning interactions are deliberately designed to help teams move forward when disruption tries to hold them back. Kate is a former senior executive, award-winning author, mentor, and educator who's spent 25 years confronting curly conundrums across the world. And Kate, I have to say, having been in corporate for many years myself, I've been involved and been on the receiving end of curly conversations. So I cannot wait to hear where you take us on this. And welcome everybody. And Kate, I'm going to hand straight over to you.
Welcome. I'm so excited to be here and be talking about curly conversations, but today I'd actually like to take a bit of a step back, because what I'd like to share with you is why we need curly conversations. What is the logic behind them, and how does that work? We're really fortunate to have quite an intimate group here. So what I love about that is that it means that we can interact and have a conversation, as well as relying on the chat if that's what you'd like to do as well. So today, firstly, just a little bit about me. Thanks, Julia, for your introduction. I have a background that I've spent most of my career navigating the results of disruption and finding a way through when things weren't straightforward. And so what I really think of myself as is I specialize in collaborative thinking. So thinking things through when actually what our bodies want to do is just power straight ahead. And so what I do is I've developed frameworks and I create the space that help people to reconnect with their the grey matter in their brain, their problem-solving brain, and actually calm down their instinctive brain. And I know in Sharon's session that she was running just before this one, Sharon will have been talking about self-talk and how that happens in our head. Well, what I do is say, how do you connect the different parts of your brain, and how do you do that when you are with other people? Today is about how do we move forward when you can't go straight ahead. I'd like to start with a poll. So which would you prefer? Number 1, moving forward. Pop your thumb up. Moving backwards, sorry. Duh. No one wants to move backwards. Okay, who'd like to stand still? No. All right, how about moving forwards? Right? Thumbs up to moving forwards. Have you ever wondered why that is? Why do we like moving forwards? Why do we feel like we have this passion for progress? And I've been fascinated by this for some time. And one of the places that I looked was to look at motion and look in science. So you might be familiar from, if you're into science or did science in high school, you'd have been familiar with this guy, Sir Isaac Newton, who created the 3 laws of motion. Is anyone familiar with what those laws are? I reckon you will be when I share them. So I've done my own interpretation of this. I wasn't particularly sciencey when I was at school. I was much more into your psychology and your arts subjects. So I've created my own versions of this. So the first law is the law of inertia. And you can see it up there. And what I do is interpret that into life and say, well, nothing changes until someone makes something or makes change happen. The second law of motion is the law of acceleration. And the law of acceleration is around the acceleration of an object is determined by the mass, how big it is, and the force applied to it, which my interpretation of that is the bigger something is, the harder you need to shove it to speed it up or slow it down. And the third law is, this will probably, has anyone heard of this law? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction somewhere back in our science brain. So if you push something, you better be ready for it to push back, is my interpretation of that. But so science is useful, but one thing, it doesn't really take into account the human element. It tells us how things move forward, but it doesn't tell us the human element of why move forward and why we're so passionate about it and why we really care. In his book, Daniel Pink, Drive, it's an awesome book. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. He talks about the truth behind what motivates us. And in the research that he did, he identifies 3 things. So he believes that if we have a sense of purpose and feel that sense of serving something bigger than ourselves, having a sense of autonomy, feeling like we're in control and able to direct our lives, and his third one is mastery, get better at what matters. He argues that these are the 3 elements that when they are in place, we want to move forward. When I talk about making progress and how do we get from A to B, this is how I look at it. I look at it in terms of, in very simple, A is where we are and B is where we want to be. And we spend our entire lives getting from A to B. So let me give you a couple of examples. And that process of getting from A to B is the job. And I refer to, when I talk about the job, what I'm talking about is this transition process of getting from A to B. So let me give you a couple of examples. So jobs can vary based on being personal jobs that just relate to us, and they can also be professional jobs, things that we're doing in our career. They can involve many people, so have many people, particularly in the workplace, or they can be just us involved in completing them. So let me give you an example of some of these. So, for example, a personal job that is just about me is A, where I might be feeling unfit and feeling tired and fatigued, and B is feeling healthy and energized. The job is whatever we need to do to get from A to B. Let me give you another example. So in terms of something that's personal that involves many people, and I have to acknowledge, in this space, I had about 60 examples and I was there trying to pull together the right one. But in many people personal, I chose a family example. So it might be that A, where we are, is stressful family holidays, but B is we'd like to have holidays that are more relaxing. So the job is how we go about making that happen, how we get progress, how we move forward. The third one around personal and individual and professional is around it can be as simple as doing a job that you hate versus doing a job that you love. And when we get into the workplace, particularly when we have many people in a professional sense, we might, as a leader, we might have a poor performing team and what we want is a high performing team. Some jobs are more straightforward than others. And one of the elements, particularly when we're in other people, Sharon will have talked about the conversations that we have with ourselves. What I particularly focus on is the conversations we have with others and how they help us to think together. Because when you think about it, a conversation in the context of getting from A to B it's a uniquely human tool. Nobody else can have conversations and do the things that we do, so we can understand the challenge. What is the job? Exchange ideas about it, explore the options. How could we possibly do that? And then address it. And what's really magical about the ability for human beings to have conversations is that even if that challenge is yet to occur, we can think about it in advance, which is quite unique. So why do we need them? Well, conversations enable us to use language to think together, work together, and move forward together, which comes back to our topic of today. So sometimes we have the right conversation. And when we have the right conversation, it helps within a group and within a team, or just within two people, to get greater clarity, cohesion, alignment, and progress. It helps us to move forward. Unfortunately, if we don't have the right conversation and we end up having the wrong conversation, and by that I mean the wrong conversation for the circumstances that we're in and the situation that we're facing, it can very easily be unhelpful and lead to confusion, division, misalignment, and what I call regress. Either we sit still when we want to be moving forward, or we feel ourselves sliding backwards. Just to check in with the group, any of that resonate? Can anyone think of a time when they've had a really great conversation, or alternatively, a time when maybe it wasn't quite the conversation that you wanted to have?
You know what, I'm just reflecting on a conversation I had with someone the other day. Yeah. And I was speaking to someone about it yesterday, and I just went, here's what happened, and I don't understand why it went down this path. I thought I was being really clear. I was, talking about, here's the facts that I heard, here's the things that I want to do with it. And they said, I think that person, because they knew the other person, I think that person maybe interpreted it that you wanted this. It's like, oh, but I thought I was being really clear, because I planned it. But, the headspace they were in at the time, and then, potentially all the other things on their mind. And I'm usually quite conscious, and particularly now about language being used and what words mean, creating that clarity. But I always try and pause and go, oh, how could I have done that differently? And this is actually quite helpful as I try and uncover what actually happened.
Again, yeah. Michelle, the next part as well, I think you'll find interesting to connect in with it. Perfect. All right, let's keep moving. So the second takeaway is that if we want to move forward, we need to have the right kind of conversation. And to do that, we need to know where we're starting. We need to start in the right place. So what I'm going to share with you now is the 7 starting points of an A to B conversation. And I want to be very clear with this. This is when you have a conversation with at least one person, and the intention is that you are moving from A to B. It's not a chat when you go out for a drink that is just about connecting. So the 7 starting points of conversations. I'm going to go through these now. I'm going to go through these quite quickly. And I'm just going to make sure that you can see that. So, and then I'm going to give you some examples. So don't worry if it feels like I've gone quickly. I'm going to keep on coming back to these. So the 7 starting points. The first one, this is where we get to here. Perfect. Why this? Why us? Why now? So this one is about, why are we having this conversation? Why is it us having the conversation? Why isn't it them having the conversation? And why now? Why do we need to have it now? So that's the first one. The second one is, what's the context? And what's the context is about, what is this conversation about? Do we have the language to have this conversation? And where does it come from? So that's the second one. The third one I can see as I look on my computer, I'm going to have to squish us back just a little because you won't be able to see it if I stay there. The fourth rung. So I think of these as being like rungs on a ladder. The fourth one is around, where are we now? Where are we now, and how did we come to be here? The fifth one is what's it going to take to succeed? The sixth one is how should we do this? This is where I'll move this one up a little bit. And the seventh one is what do we do now? Can everyone see those? Give me a thumbs up. You see them? Yeah, cool, great. So the key elements of these is that these aren't just the content. Because these are like the rungs of a ladder, if you've got this, great, you can go up to the next one. If you've got this, great, go up to the next one and the next one. You can't climb a ladder missing the rungs, right? Especially a big ladder. Imagine you've got this, you cannot get up to the top. And what I'm going to share with you in a little while is why we get stuck, why we aren't able to move forward, and how curly conversations can help us with that. All right, so let's just look at the nature of these. I call anything that is below, sort of in the middle, where we start our conversations, these are the lower rung conversations. If we start from 4 downwards are the lower rung conversations. From 4 upwards are the upper rung conversations. Now, what can you notice about these questions? What do you notice? What's the transition that is happening with them? The conversations that are upper rung, the further up the rungs you are, yeah, thanks, Sue. The lower rung is about alignment. In fact, all of this is about alignment. And I'll talk a bit about what happens when we get misalignment. Yep, the upper rung is about moving forward. The upper rung is about action. It's about doing. And then what we've got at the bottom, the lower rungs are about thinking. Now, that doesn't mean you don't think up here, and it doesn't mean you don't do stuff down here. But what it does mean is that it is more action-oriented when we're having these conversations, and it's more thought, problem-solving oriented when we're down here. This makes sense? So the right kind of conversation starts in the right place. So let's take this example here. So here we've got some architects that are on a building site. They've got the plans there, and they're clearly working out what they need to do next. Now, where do you think they are having an upper rung conversation or a lower rung conversation? Put your thumb up. Who thinks they're having an upper rung conversation? Michelle, are you going lower rung? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So one of the things, let me explain how the ladder works in the upper rungs. The more you know and the more you collectively know together is how you have an upper rung conversation. So up here, you have a lot of knowledge. So in this example, the architects, they're all architects. They have the same language. They're all on the same building site. They have a lot, it's the degree to which you have knowledge under your belt, and most importantly, the degree to which that knowledge is shared. That makes sense? Yeah? Let me give you another example. So these young women are going on, just scored a goal in volleyball. They've been playing together for a while. They would also be having when they go onto the court, they would be having an upper rung conversation. The reason for that is if they started, what's the context? Well, they know the context. They're going on to have a game of volleyball, right? And what's the desired outcome? The desired outcome is winning. So they don't need to have a conversation about that. Where are we now? Well, they're probably pretty clear that they're about, third on the ladder. and they're clear that as they walk onto the court that they're starting the game. So it's about the here and now. What should we be doing? What will it take for us to succeed? And it might be, what will it take for us to succeed against this team? Can you see how they can be starting their conversation higher up the ladder? Is this making sense? Can you see with these examples? All right, I'm going to give you some more examples in a moment. So the third example, these surgeons, they are about to open someone up, having an operation. Where do you think, which side of the ladder would, if that was you on the operating table, where would you like them to be starting? Exactly. Yeah. What will it take to succeed? Let's just be clear, Julia. That's absolutely right. Yeah, I'd like them way up there. Thanks very much. And this is the thing. When we're up the ladder, there are times we have to be up the ladder. You want expertise. You want someone who knows what the heck they're doing, right? But it's not always the place to start. And I'll come to that in a moment. So when we're doing familiar jobs, when we're doing routine jobs, we start in the upper rungs. And that's when it feels straightforward. The reason it feels straightforward is we have a cushion of knowledge. This cushion of knowledge that I've talked about here, we know all of this, so we can just get on and move forward. And that can feel straightforward. So what also happens with this is that when we're here, often it's about knowing, it's about being quite comfortable. You know, have you ever walked into a meeting going, I'm so prepared, I know my topic, I'm going in fully ready to have this conversation, meaning you're ready to start a conversation up here. And what it means is you can be confident. This is the upper rungs are the rungs of confidence. And it's where having the answers is what brings us to life. Having the answers and knowing is what helps us to move forward. And if we've got experience in something, we will be at the top rungs, but not always. And that's where we come to this next part. So let's just look at a different scenario where there's the impact of the unexpected. So let's say we had our architects and they were just about to have this meeting, and the guy with the beard in the middle got a call from the boss of the building site to say, hey mate, it looks like one of our investors has just pulled out. You know, I don't know why it is, but just pulled out, which means, you know how we were going to build 3 towers? Now it's only going to be 2. Right. So what happens to this, what was an upper rung conversation? Unmute yourself. What do you think happens?
It would drop down because there's uncertainty.
When the unexpected happens, the unexpected causes uncertainty, and the uncertainty, a new word, and uncertainty causes the need often to drop down the rungs of the starting point, to start in a different space. So these people, even though they still have a level of knowledge, they still understand what the plan is, but the plan's now irrelevant because the thing they're looking at has 3 towers on it, not 2. So they have to go, oh, okay, well, down at level 2, starting conversation. Okay, well, what does that mean? What's happened? You know, they go into that state of confusion. In order for them to go back up the ladder and to be able to say, right, what are we going to do now? They need to climb back up to say, what is the desired outcome? Well, where are we now? Does this resonate, make sense why you have to go from top to bottom? Another example, these young women go onto the court and or about to go onto the court, and just as they do so, it's announced that the volleyball league has just changed the rules. Instead of having 2 people on the court, you'll have 3 people now. Okay, so how does this game work with 3 people? What's going to happen, and what do we do now? And the same thing, if you had a surgeon, you had these surgeons, and they're just about to get going with the operation, and one of them looks under the sheet that's there and sees that it's not a person, it's a dolphin that got caught in a net. And somehow this dolphin is now in their operating theatre. Now, completely unrealistic, but you get the drift of these people. It's not that these surgeons are inexperienced surgeons. So an upper rung conversation isn't better than a lower rung conversation. It's just different. And so these people who are experts would suddenly find themselves in the, hang on, what the heck? Why is there a dolphin on here? Hang on, why us? Why does it need to be us? Where's the vet? Can you see how disruption or unexpected events cause disruption? And when we experience disruption, we need to rethink where we start the conversation. Am I making sense? Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or if you've got a question. Has anyone got a question? I can see my...
Not a question, but just I guess in a way. So rather than it being a utopian place on the ladder, it's about understanding the place that you're at on the ladder, so that you can manage that conversation.
Yes, understanding where you are at, understanding where other people are at, and I'll talk a bit about how you do that. And one of the challenges, one of the reasons that that I wrote Curly Conversations for Teams is that there is a perception that upper rung conversations are better than lower rung conversations. And upper rung conversations, if you stay there when you need to have a lower rung conversation, you end up in all sorts of strife. Any other points? That was a great point, Sue. Any others? Questions, thoughts, ideas?
I think if I look back at the conversations I've had over the years, or particularly when people have come to have conversations with me, sort of the amount of times I've said, back up the bus a little bit, just to sort of like they've come in at like 4 or 5, or this is what we're going to do. And you go, hang on a minute, I need some background information. I'm further down the ladder than they are, particularly when you're a leader of a team.
Yes.
You don't have all the detail.
Yep. All sorts of things can happen in this space. So disruption, takeaway number 5, disruption changes your starting point. And when we know that, it makes it a whole heap easier. And let's look here in terms of what happens and how that works. So disruption changes the starting point when, let's say, you're the leader. I'll just put these. You're the leader, and you've just come in, and you can absolutely see what needs to be done because you've got a whole heap of experience in teams, but you've just come into a new team. How does that work? You might be somewhere up here, but your team might be somewhere down there, perhaps. And even better, your team might be spread across all of the rungs. And depending on their experience, in my book, I talk about that disruption has 2 sides, and it's like a coin where there's the side that you can see, and then there's the side that you kind of have to lift up the coin and look underneath. And what I share there is something I call the wheel of disruption. The wheel of disruption is how do you work out where everybody is, not just in their heads, but emotionally when the unexpected has happened. And that's a really useful tool. Can anyone think of a time when they've been here, or for another example could be you've just started a new job, but your boss has been waiting for you for 3 months in the recruitment process, and people just want you to get on with it, but you're still here working out, well, where am I? How does this work? One of the things to be most aware of is, you know, if I was going to learn Japanese, so my daughter's just started learning Japanese, there is a difference. How we get to where we are on the ladder makes a difference. So take the example of learning Japanese. If I decided I was going to learn Japanese, I would start at the lower level of the ladder. This is how we learn, right? This is, oh, what is it that I want? Why do I want to learn Japanese? Okay, what's the context? How does Japanese work? And then you learn all about these things. And actually, if you start calmly working your way up the ladder, and what do I need to do? How do I do this? Developing my knowledge and expertise. Actually, it could be really energizing, right? When we're learning and learning on our terms, it's really energizing. Where things go wrong, and in 25 years in the corporate world of working in this space, where things go wrong is where we used to be, when we were doing a particular job, we used to be at the top of the ladder. The unexpected happens, or disruption is made to happen. We find ourselves, if this is where we were, we find ourselves slide down the ladder. That experience of sliding down the ladder is where we start to feel uncomfortable. Anyone ever had people, when something happens, reacting to it? Going, oh, no, what should we do? Right? And yet the ability to acknowledge that sliding down the ladder and having to go back to say, well, what outcome do we want? Even thinking, what is A and B? Is A and B still the same when things have changed? And being comfortable with that. I'm conscious we've got a couple more minutes to go. Resonating? We're good? Okay. So conversations that are not straightforward feel difficult. And if you find something feels difficult, what are you most likely to do? Especially when you're busy and you go a whole heap on. But given the option, we will avoid difficult and choose easy conversations. And that's where the type of conversation that you have determines whether you are on the spiral of compromise or the springboard of success. And it doesn't matter whether you are talking about an A to B process that is relatively small, or a massive transformation in an organization. If the conversation, the right people don't start in the right place on the conversation ladder, it cannot succeed. And I say that because I've done this for 25 years and I've spent most of my life dealing with the implications of what happens when you start in the wrong place. And that's why I do what I do. So let me quickly, in our last 5 minutes, let me share with you the approach that I've developed, which has really developed out of that frustration and knowing from the inside that it doesn't have to be this hard. You just need to know how to have conversations differently. So how do you use a curly conversation to move forward when you can't go straight ahead, i.e. when you were up here and now you're down there? There are 5 principles. The first one is start in the same place. And I think, Sue, this was one of the things that you were talking to in the beginning. Everybody needs to start in the same place, because you can imagine if everyone is answering different questions, and I think it might have been Michelle, possibly you said about alignment. All of this is about alignment. You cannot align if you don't start in the same place. The second one is to switch our mindset. And that if we think of a conversation as being difficult, we will avoid it. If we think of it as being different and we have a strategy and a framework to help us work through it, then we're more likely to lean into it. And we're not going to feel like we're failing because we're now on a lower rung of the ladder. I think of this as being the difference. You can see I have curly hair. The reason they're curly conversations, I believe for most of my life that I should have had straight hair. It was all a mistake that I had curly hair. And what I've learned over the years is that curly hair is fundamentally structured differently to straight hair. And when you think of the conversations these straightforward conversations, if you try to make them be straightforward, they won't work. They need to be curly. And that's more with that movement and a different kind. See disruption from the inside. This is my favorite slide. This is an image of a wave from the inside. So to think of disruption, to see disruption with a curiosity. Often we think, and I talk about in my book about things being, we see disruption as being a bit like evil. Evil, if you say someone's evil, oh, why did that person do that terrible thing? Oh, it's because they're evil. Well, then we kind of go, oh yeah, it's because they're evil, right? But we're not curious about, well, yeah, but what does that mean? We do the same often with disruption. We go, oh, there's all this disruption, there's all this change. Actually, you can understand it and you don't have to get lost in the complexity to do that. There are ways to do it. So yes, see disruption from the inside. These conversations that are low down here, and particularly, it's not really where you land, it's the fact that where you started, did you do the slide down the ladder? That kind of transition conversation must be designed. If you let it happen the way a straightforward conversation will happen, you will naturally gravitate to the top of the ladder and will not get the result that you want. And the final one is around harnessing the energy. The energy, when we take off, there is a massive energy that often is seen as being negative. And in the work I do now and the work I've done in the past, that energy is what makes us feel alive. And it's how we put the fun back into work, and it's how we get the results that we need in a world that is full of uncertainty. So I'm going to do a very quick recap so you've seen all of these. Takeaway number 1, some jobs are more straightforward than others. Takeaway number 2, if you want to move forward, you need to have the right kind of conversation. Takeaway number 3, the right kind of conversation starts in the right place. Takeaway number 4, familiar routine jobs start in the upper rungs and these conversations feel straightforward. Next one, disruption changes the starting point. And sometimes it changes it permanently, and sometimes it just means you need to take a dip. And this takeaway, conversations that are not straightforward often feel difficult. And especially when we are busy, we'll avoid these conversations. So in conclusion, when you can't go straight ahead, what you need is a curly conversation. And that's how you can take yourself and your team forward. And it's how you can move yourself forward in your head and harness the energy that comes with disruption rather than being afraid of it. If you want to know more, I'm going to put in the swag bag, I'll put the first chapter of my book. You can have a look at that. And if you want to, you can also scan there. That will take you to my website and you can learn a bit more about what a curly conversation is.